What if a fighter jet that costs billions less is forcing the Pentagon to rethink how power really works in the air? One recent deal has defense analysts running the numbers again because it challenges long-standing assumptions about cost, control, and capability. This aircraft isn't the biggest and it isn't the most expensive, yet it keeps showing up in serious procurement talks. Countries are asking why they should pay more for systems that fly less often and lock them into long contracts. Behind closed doors, this has sparked debate about dependence, readiness, and who actually holds leverage. It's not about replacing US air power overnight, but about what happens when credible options exist. And it's raising questions that go far beyond jets, reaching into budgets, alliances, and long-term strategy. Join us in this video as we uncover the Gripen deal that just sent shockwaves through the Pentagon. When fighter jets are discussed, especially in connection with the Pentagon, the story is usually framed in very simple terms. Bigger is treated as better. Higher cost is assumed to mean greater strength. And if a program ends up costing hundreds of billions over its lifetime, that price is explained away as the cost of national security. But that story deserves a pause, because underneath the talk of stealth, dominance, and next-generation systems, something quieter is unfolding. And it's causing real discomfort inside Washington. Not because the United States is about to lose control of the skies overnight, but because a smaller nation has shown that air power does not have to follow the path America has pushed for decades. What truly unsettles defense planners isn't the idea that Sweden's Gripen can beat every American jet in close combat. It can't. The concern runs much deeper. The Gripen questions the financial and strategic framework behind how the United States projects force, sells aircraft to partners, and maintains leverage through defense spending. Once that becomes clear, it's easier to see why this relatively modest aircraft is suddenly getting so much attention. At first glance, this appears to be a standard procurement issue. A European defence company is making a move into North America. Saab, one of Europe's largest defence manufacturers, is offering Canada a fighter jet that comes with local production, technology sharing, and thousands of jobs. Estimates point to roughly 10,000 research and manufacturing roles if Canada adds the Swedish Gripen to its fleet. That choice goes far beyond defence. It becomes a question of industry. Who builds the equipment? Who owns the technology, and who controls supply lines when a crisis hits all come into play. But the bigger issue isn't limited to Canada or Sweden. It's about what kind of military approach makes sense in a world where money is tighter, infrastructure is easier to disrupt, and wars are no longer fought from a few massive, protected bases. The Gripen doesn't dominate headlines because it clashes with the image many people have of modern air combat. It isn't huge. It doesn't carry a price tag that climbs into the hundreds of millions per aircraft. Instead, it was built around efficiency, flexibility, and the ability to keep operating under pressure. That design forces an uncomfortable question. What if control of the air isn't about owning the most advanced jet on paper, but about which aircraft can stay operational when systems start failing? Sweden's thinking on air power grew out of caution, but not the kind often discussed in Pentagon briefings. Swedish planners assumed that if conflict broke out, it would escalate fast. Bases would be hit early. Roads, fuel depots, and supply routes would be targeted. In that environment, relying on large airfields and long logistics chains simply didn't make sense. So Sweden created a fighter that could take off from highways, be refueled and rearmed far from traditional bases, and return to action quickly with small ground teams. This idea of spreading air power across many locations directly challenges the traditional American model. The United States has built its air strategy around reach, large overseas bases, deep logistics networks, and premium aircraft with massive lifetime costs that only a few countries can support. That system works when conditions are controlled. The Gripen, however, is designed to keep flying after the first wave of strikes. When American analysts study modern conflict scenarios where bases, fuel supplies, and transport routes are under threat, they see an issue they're uncomfortable addressing. Availability can matter more than perfection. An aircraft that can launch again tomorrow may be more useful than one that performs best in ideal conditions, but struggles when support systems are strained. This is where the economic side becomes impossible to ignore. Because the Gripen costs less to buy and operate, air forces can keep more aircraft ready, train more pilots, and log more flight hours. That directly affects readiness. And readiness isn't theoretical. It means pilots with sharper skills because they fly more often. It means jets that are ready when needed, not grounded because maintenance budgets were cut. When allied nations realise they can maintain credible air defence without draining their finances, They start questioning why they were told there was only one route to security. Those questions don't just put pressure on a single aircraft program. They challenge a system built on dependence. And that's where much of the unease in Washington comes from. Another part of the picture rarely discussed openly is how much influence comes not just from selling the aircraft, but from controlling everything tied to it. Modern fighter jets are not standalone machines. They are entire systems. Software updates, mission data, communications links, maintenance rules, spare parts, and training programs all bind the buyer to the seller. For decades, American fighter exports have acted as diplomatic glue. Purchasing the jet also meant buying into US logistics, US-approved software, and US strategic priorities. That structure helped hold alliances together, but it also meant air power became a channel of influence. The Gripen quietly disrupts that setup. Saab designed it to work with NATO systems without locking operators into full dependence on American command structures. It can connect across air, land, and sea platforms while allowing nations to retain control over their own data systems. That difference matters more than it first appears. In modern conflict, control of information often decides outcomes. A fighter that allows cooperation without total reliance introduces a new balance. Partners can work together without handing over control of their entire operational framework. From Washington's point of view, that isn't a minor technical choice. It represents a strategic change. Then there's the engine philosophy, which may sound dull until its impact becomes clear. Saab focused on durability, quick servicing, and long maintenance intervals, instead of chasing extreme thrust or peak performance figures. High-powered engines look impressive in demonstrations, but they require specialized teams, complex logistics, and constant upkeep. Gripen's engine allows aircraft to stay operational, with fewer delays. And when military planners simulate wars where air bases are damaged, fuel supplies are limited, and spare parts arrive late, a hard reality becomes clear. The aircraft that can keep flying often matters more than the one that looks strongest on paper. That leads directly to export strategy, which is where the financial pressure really starts to show. Saab isn't just offering fighter jets. It provides technology sharing, local production, and industrial involvement for countries that want to build their own aerospace sectors instead of staying dependent buyers. That offer is hard to ignore. Every Gripen agreement is more than a defence purchase. It represents a move to expand national manufacturing, create skilled jobs, and cut long-term reliance on foreign suppliers. And each time a country chooses that path, American influence shrinks slightly. You can see this dynamic playing out in Canada right now. Canada has committed to buying the F-35, but only a portion of the planned aircraft have actually been ordered. At the same time, Saab has presented proposals that include building Gripen fighters inside Canada, with the possibility of exporting them to partners such as Ukraine. This goes far beyond basic assembly. The proposal involves full domestic production capability with lasting economic effects. Thousands of direct manufacturing jobs would be created, along with thousands more tied to supporting systems like GlobalEye. For leaders facing job losses in traditional industries and pressure to broaden the economy, that kind of offer is difficult to dismiss. Industry Minister Melanie Joly has made it clear that industrial benefit packages are part of these discussions. This isn't simply a question of switching aircraft. It's about whether Canada remains mainly a customer in the global defence market or steps into the role of a producer. Prime Minister Mark Carney has previously noted that most of Canada's defence spending ends up with American companies. In that context, diversification isn't about breaking alliances. It's about independence. It's about making sure cooperation doesn't turn into long-term reliance. From Washington's viewpoint, this creates a challenge. NATO relies on compatibility, and American systems connect smoothly with US intelligence and command networks. That strengthens joint defence, but it also ties allies into extended contracts, maintenance deals, and political approvals that last long after the initial sale. Gripen offers an alternative route: compatibility without full dependence. For countries trying to balance budgets, national control, and alliance responsibilities, that option is appealing, even if it doesn't fit perfectly with US priorities. Pilot training adds another important layer. Lower operating costs allow for more flight time. More flight time leads to better trained pilots. In long conflicts, training quality can matter more than small differences in aircraft performance. US planners understand this well. Readiness often decides results, not glossy presentations. An air force that can afford regular training gains an advantage that builds over time, especially when resources are tight or bases come under attack. So when reports say the Pentagon is watching a Swedish fighter jet closely, it's not fear of dogfights driving that interest. What they're really observing is a shift in long-held ideas about how air power is designed, sold and managed. Once those ideas begin to weaken, the effects reach far beyond any single aircraft program. That's where this stops being just about jets and becomes a story about systems. Air power has never been limited to what happens in the air. It also involves who sets the rules, who gains the economic value, and who gets locked into long-term commitments that shape public spending for decades. When a country buys into an expensive, tightly controlled weapons ecosystem, it isn't only buying defence, it's tying future taxpayers to that system, even if it no longer serves broader economic goals. This tension is clear in Canada's current debate. The government is under pressure from several directions at once. Traditional sectors like auto manufacturing, steel, aluminium and lumber have suffered from layoffs, trade disputes and tariffs. Nearly 200,000 workers are connected to industries under strain. In that environment, proposals that promise advanced manufacturing, technology sharing, and lasting industrial capacity carry major political weight. Defence production, much like pharmaceuticals, offers stable jobs, skilled labour, and domestic control over key supply chains. That matters when economic strength is seen as part of national security. Saab's forecasts explain why this discussion has picked up speed. Projections linked to the Gripen E program alone point to thousands of direct and indirect jobs. Add the option of producing a global surveillance platform at home, and the employment impact grows even further. But the key issue isn't just job totals. It's the difference between hosting a final assembly line and building full domestic production capability. One creates short-term work. The other builds skills that can be used for decades, including exports. That difference matters because defence procurement has a long record of promises that don't fully deliver. Governments invest public money expecting jobs and industrial growth, only to later find much of the value went elsewhere. Canada's recent move to take legal action against Stellantis over unmet job commitments tied to a taxpayer-funded deal shows how sensitive this issue has become. When public funds are involved, follow-through matters. Workers and communities remember when commitments aren't kept. So when Canadian officials say they're re-examining defence purchases, they're not just reviewing technical details. They're responding to public doubt shaped by real experience. People want to know whether large spending truly builds domestic strength or simply deepens dependence. That doubt reaches into defence policy too, even if it's often expressed more quietly. From the Pentagon's side, this creates a wider strategic effect. If allies begin placing greater value on cost control, resilience, and domestic industry over maximum integration with US systems, the United States risks losing more than contracts. It risks losing the built-in advantage of being the default supplier. Power doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, deal by deal, as other options start to make sense. There's a quiet irony here. The same features that make the Gripen appealing to smaller and developing nations are the ones that matter most in today's conflicts. Operating from dispersed locations, fast turnaround times, lighter support needs, and high readiness rates are not drawbacks. They reflect how warfare now works in a world shaped by precision weapons, cyber interference, and fragile supply routes. Sweden never built the Gripen to win status contests. It built it to keep operating under pressure. US defence planners recognise this, which is why the aircraft is studied seriously instead of brushed aside. The concern isn't about losing air superiority tomorrow. It's about what happens when long-held beliefs start to weaken. When partner nations begin asking why they should spend more on systems that fly less, train less, and create deeper reliance, the traditional arguments lose their punch. This strain shows up clearly inside NATO. The alliance is based on collective defence, but its members don't all face the same priorities. Some focus on power projection far beyond their borders. Others care most about protecting their own territory and staying operational during crises. For decades, American platforms helped bridge those differences. The Gripen introduces a different way of thinking. It suggests that countries can play a serious role in shared defence without giving up control over spending, software access, or industrial decisions. That doesn't mean US systems no longer matter. Advanced capabilities still have value. Stealth, integrated sensors, and tightly linked networks offer real benefits. But once credible alternatives exist, trade-offs can no longer be ignored. That discussion isn't limited to defence officials. It's happening among taxpayers, workers, and lawmakers who want to know what security actually costs and who ends up paying for it. Looking at the bigger picture, this is a quiet challenge to the idea that strength must always be centralised, costly, and closed off. Sweden's model points to another path, one where durability, flexibility, and reasonable costs can exist alongside solid defence capability. When that idea spreads, it changes more than procurement decisions. It reshapes how security fits into the wider economy and political system. There's also a human angle that often gets lost when the focus stays on aircraft and alliances. Defence contracts affect everyday lives. They shape whether communities gain lasting production jobs or short-term work that vanishes when a programme ends. They help decide whether young engineers see a future at home or feel forced to move elsewhere. And they determine whether public funds circulate within national industries or flow outward year after year. For workers, this is very real. A fighter programme built around local manufacturing and shared technology can support suppliers, training programmes, and research centres. Those skills often carry over into civilian sectors, strengthening the economy as a whole. When defence spending works like that, it starts to resemble public investment instead of a money sink. When it doesn't, it becomes much harder to defend to people already dealing with rising living costs, medical bills, and flat incomes. This is where the gap between elite performance and everyday readiness really matters. A system that looks unbeatable in tightly managed conditions may not deliver the same return when budgets shrink or priorities change. Lower running costs don't just help military planners. They ease pressure on government finances, they make long-term commitments easier to maintain, and they allow pilots and crews to train more often, which directly affects their safety in real operations. There's another issue from a democratic point of view. When defence systems become so complex and expensive that only a small group truly understands them, oversight suffers. Decisions drift further away from public view. Classified designs, long contracts, and locked software systems widen the distance between elected officials and what they've approved. Models that promote openness, shared production, and clearer pricing can reduce that gap, even if they can't close it completely. That's why unease in Washington can't be brushed off as simple turf defence. The Gripen represents a different balance between governments, contractors, and citizens. It gives buyers more leverage. It limits long-term lock-in and reminds states that military strength doesn't have to come with permanent reliance. For a system that has long depended on those ties to maintain reach and sway, that shift feels unsettling. None of this should be idealised. Every defence company, Saab included, operates to make money. Claims about jobs and technology sharing need close review, not automatic trust. Governments must check promises, enforce terms, and protect workers when plans fall short. Recent legal battles over failed industrial commitments in other fields show what happens when checks are weak. Defence programmes shouldn't be treated differently. Still, recognising those risks doesn't erase the larger reality. Real alternatives change negotiating power. When buyers have choices, they can ask for better conditions. They can push for local gains. They can link defence spending to broader economic aims instead of treating it as untouchable. That shift alone changes how military power fits into politics and economics. So when concerns about Sweden's Gripen surface in Washington, it's worth asking what future those worries point to. Are they about supporting partners, or about preserving a system that concentrates control and value among a small few? Are they about real-world effectiveness, or about protecting long-standing beliefs that no longer go untested? If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, drop a comment and share your take below. Hit like if you found value in it, and subscribe for more clear, no-nonsense analysis on defence, power, and policy.